Great. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here on time, as I mentioned, for the first day of class. We have a small class this semester. Normally, human anatomy is offered every spring, but I'm not teaching this coming spring, and so we're offering it this fall. So that kind of works out well for you. I think it's a little bit more of a chill environment and a little less crowded of a classroom. Normally, the classroom is like we have to bring in extra chairs, and they're pretty packed in here. So that'll be nice, and labs will be smaller as well. So I want to just do today is going to be a quick introduction to how the course is structured, what topics we'll cover, and a chance for you to ask some questions and just kind of get our legs going with the semester. And then Friday, we'll kind of start into more of the content. So this is Biology 329, Human Anatomy. That's right. Everyone's in the right place. Okay, good. That's a good start. Let me just get this. All right, so today's agenda, I'm going to start every class with an agenda that looks like this, just to walk you through so you know what to expect. First, I'm going to have a short lecture, just introduce you to the topic of human anatomy, what kinds of things we'll be covering this semester, etc. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, so you kind of know what you're getting yourself into for the semester. I think, no, Taryn, you had herpetology with me, so yeah, and Sarah, you were in 251. I don't think anyone else I've had class with before, is that right? No, that's a new face at school. Then I'm going to just tell you how the course is structured, kind of logistically, what to expect every lecture, and what your assignments will look like, that kind of thing. And then we're going to wrap up and get started. I have an introduction survey. So class will be a little short today, and you'll have an assignment that you can either stay here and do now and get it done, or you can take it home with you, and I'll walk you through what that is. But today is just going to be kind of a general overview and introduction. Before I dive into it, any questions yet? Okay, let's go ahead and jump in then. So anatomy and physiology, you hear these terms a lot. I want to make sure we're starting off with a good understanding of what those two terms mean. Some of you have taken Biology 251, which is human anatomy and physiology. And then there is the upper level human physiology class that Dr. Penwis teaches. And then there's the upper level human anatomy class that I teach. And so anatomy is the science of body structures and the relationships among those structures. Let me just situate one thing here for myself to make this easier. There we go. And so it's the parts of the body, basically, and how those parts relate to each other. Physiology, on the other hand, is more the science of body functions and how those functions are integrated across system to maintain what's called homeostasis, the internal environment so that your body can continue to function. So you can think of anatomy as the study of the form of the body and physiology as the study of the function of the body. But as you know, those two things are highly interrelated. The structure of the structure of different parts of your body inform how those structures operate, and vice versa. So there's not really a fine line between human anatomy and physiology. So a little bit this semester, we'll veer into a tiny bit of physiology even, and in your human physiology classes, you'll veer into a little bit of anatomy as well. But we're generally going to stay pretty focused on anatomy. And it's a pretty descriptive class that I teach, which means that we have a bunch of parts of your body, and you're going to learn where they are, what they're called, how they're structured, how they move in some cases. It's not a lot of exploration. So for example, the labs are going to be very memorization based. I've thought about different ways to make the class a little more inquiry based. So it's kind of open-ended questions, but human anatomy is a little tricky because we kind of know a lot about it. Though we're learning some new things every day. And so the labs are very much based on observing and learning the names of all of those parts and being able to identify them from each other. So the word anatomy actually comes from a Greek root that means to cut apart. And so the root of the whole field is what we can learn by cutting apart human bodies. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a cadaver lab in this class. That's something I'd actually love to do in the future. But we do have a lot of specimens we'll look at, including a huge variety of actual human bones, replicas, models, and all that kind of stuff. And you'll see that in lab soon enough. Just as a quick aside, often in lecture, I will be providing you with generally the Greek or Latin roots of the terms you see, and you'll see that signified with a capital G or a capital L. It's not important in the sense that, well, the idea here is to help you kind of make connections with these terms to things you already know and kind of become familiar with this scientific or anatomical language. I'm not going to ask you questions about like, oh, does the word humerus have a Greek or Latin root or something like that. It just kind of helped you a little bit orient yourself with some of the terms, because some of the terms are a little obtuse. And so my thought there is just to kind of orient you a little bit, make connections with language that you might already know. So language is the science of cutting things up. We can divide anatomy into there's a couple different ways we can approach anatomy. Come on in here, if you don't mind. Would you pass this back? Or here you go. You just make yourself a name tag. Welcome to class. We can study anatomy in a couple different ways, right? So generally speaking, gross anatomy is what we can see with the naked eye. 95% of this class is gross anatomy, but we do study histology as well, which is the study of cells that we see in a microscope, right? And we can study this gross anatomy a couple different ways. One is talking about regional anatomy. And so that is, there's Danny. What's up, Danny? How you doing? Come on in. Regional anatomy is taking a section of the body and learning all of the parts that are in that body. So we can, for example, study the abdomen, and then you learn all of the different organs and body structures that are in the abdomen, or the head, and you learn all the different structures in the head. And that's generally how medical schools approach anatomy. And the reason is because if someone comes in, let's say someone comes into the doctor's office, they're not going to point to their upper leg and say, I'm having a problem with my skeletal muscular structure. They're going to say, my leg hurts, right? And then the doctor's job is to, okay, we know the anatomy of this region, so we're going to identify what part in that region is giving this person problems or something like that. On the other hand, the approach that we generally take here is what's called systemic anatomy. So we're going to walk through all of the general organ systems. So we're going to study all the bones in the body. We're going to study all the skeletal muscles in the body. We're going to study the endocrine system, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a little bit of a different approach, and I want you to be aware of that going in. It's not really going to affect how we do things day to day in this class, but just to give you a little bit of a heads up. We can also think about surface anatomy. So that's when we use landmarks on the surface of the body to identify underlying structures. We'll do a little bit of that, but in all honesty, not too much. And then I hinted at histology a little bit, and we will start off our second lab is looking at cells and tissues under microscopes and identifying the different cell types and tissue types based on the structure of the cells. And we'll do that a little bit at the beginning of the class. And we'll come back to it here and there throughout the semester, but not too much. Let me pause there, see what questions you have. Danny, here, make yourself a name tag. What's your favorite color between orange, blue, and green? Cool. Any questions? Although I'm realizing these name tags are great for me, but not as great for you. Well, I guess if you're in the front, we can turn around and see everybody. But those of you in the back, maybe you could, you know what you could do? Put your name on the back of your name tag too, and then people sitting behind you can see your name if you want. All right, let's talk about the general hierarchy of structure of the human body. And I'm just going to walk us through very quickly what we're going to cover in this class, working from tissues to organ systems. So a tissue is a group of cells that perform a common function. And so we can think of skeletal muscle tissue, the tissue, the cells that work together in your bicep to allow you to do this. All of those tissues then form larger structures called organs. And so organs are a part of your body that performs a function, and it's composed of different tissue types. And so, for example, your heart contains muscle, obviously, but it also contains nerve cells. It also contains epithelial cells that line the blood vessels, or excuse me, endothelial cells that line the blood vessels. It also contains fatty tissue, et cetera, et cetera. So that whole unit is an organ. Take the heart, for example, but it's composed of these different tissue types. Then a bunch of organs work together and they perform an essential function in your body. So we can think of the cardiovascular system, the heart and blood vessels that deliver oxygen and remove waste throughout the body, et cetera. Or your nervous system, you have your brain and your spinal cord and all the associated nerves and everything like that. And so as we walk through each kind of topic in class, we'll talk about things on a tissue level, an organ level, and the organ system level. And generally speaking, so this is a diagram from your book that actually expands this a little bit. I mentioned these 3 levels, but I want to note that you can actually get even smaller and look at things on a chemical level or a cellular level at a very, very small scale. We're not going to get into that at all. There's no chemistry in this class. I mean, we might make tangential references to some chemistry, but there's no chemistry in this class. And also at the organismal level, we're not going to cover that too much either. And that's looking at like the whole performance of the integrated individual. So that would be more when you get into something like exercise physiology, how all these structures of the body can help a person run faster or swim faster or play field hockey better or whatever. So we will be focusing on the tissues, organs, and organ systems. Questions? Danny, I'm looking to you. I'm used to you having questions all the time, and now it's going to be different. I'll introduce you in a minute, but yeah. Okay. Let's see here. Let's talk a little more. I don't want to talk too much, but I want to just, okay, I have a couple more slides just by way of introduction. We're also going to touch on a couple other aspects of anatomy, but only briefly. One of those is embryology. So that has to do with development and the structures of the human body before birth. There's a few places where I'll make reference to that, but in this class, I generally gloss over this. Your textbook gets into more detail on this if this is something you're particularly interested in. But I find that we just don't have room in the semester to cover this in any kind of meaningful way. And kind of related to embryology is also developmental anatomy. And we'll get into this a little bit, how these body structures change across your lifespan. So for example, your skeletal system changes dramatically from the time you're born to the time you're an adult. And we'll talk about those changes, how bones fuse together, et cetera, et cetera. And also we'll talk a little bit about pathological anatomy. So when things don't go as they generally should to provide optimal function for the body, that's always kind of fun and interesting. And finally, a little bit, or not finally, one more. We'll talk a little bit about radiographic anatomy. So we'll look at the body through the lens of an X-ray and what we can see through X-ray imaging or MRI, CAT scans, things like that. I'll touch on that a little bit because it's kind of cool and interesting, but it won't be a main focus. And finally, the area that I'm most interested in is functional morphology. And that has to do with how the size and shape of your different body parts affects your ability to do things. So for example, you can think about how long your leg bones are and how that might relate to your ability to jump or to climb or something like that. And the reason I'm interested in this is because this is my area of research. This is what I research, at least partially, is functional morphology. But I don't study humans, I study lizards. And we do work in the lab examining how the structure of lizard bodies, so for example, the shape of their claws or the length of their legs, affects their ability to run, affects their ability to cling to different substances, affects their ability to climb and stuff like that. So this is the part that I'm actually really interested in. This class, we don't really get into that too much with humans. We kind of touch on it. But if you're interested, I also teach a vertebrate anatomy class that gets into that in a lot more detail in other non-human animals. We talk about humans mostly non-humans. So that's my jam, functional morphology. It's cool. Questions? Okay, I've got another set of slides here I want to walk through just briefly, and just to give you a general overview of what the different systems are that we'll cover this semester. We're going to spend days, if not weeks, on each of these. So the idea now, just kind of sit back. You don't need to take detailed notes on this, but just kind of think about what these different systems are in your body, and think about, you can think about examples for yourself of what parts of your body compose those systems. I'm going to start off with the integumentary system. So this is basically all the stuff on the outside of your body that generally serves to protect the inside of your body. There's also performs other important functions. For example, they're sensory organs. They sense pain, pressure, temperature, things like that. Your skin synthesizes vitamin D that you need. You also sweat. I'm going to talk a lot about this semester. Humans, if we are good at anything better than other animals, there's really two things that we can do better than any other animal species. and that is calculus and sweat. Humans are world champion sweaters, which sounds a little weird, but actually has been super important in our evolutionary history to allow us to run long distances and do things like that. And that all comes from your integumentary system. So that's like your fingernails, your skin, your hair. That's not a good example. Your hair, all of that stuff on the outside of your body. We'll then get into your skeletal system. You're probably familiar with this, all of the bones, how those bones are connected and how they're connected to muscles that allow movement specifically. Bones are super cool. I'm going to spend a lot of time on bones. We generally think of bones as just these hard things that allow us to move, but there's these very dynamic organs that perform a lot of functions. For example, they form red blood cells, they produce hormones, they have a great capacity to heal themselves. Even if it's broken a bone is probably hopefully familiar with that. They're actually pretty remarkable organs. We'll talk about your skeletal muscles and other muscles in the body. So here, your skeletal muscles are what allows us to move through space, which is obviously very important, can be really fun. In the first month and a half probably of the class, we're going to cover the systems that you see here, the integumentary, the skeletal, and the muscular systems. That'll take us through the end of September-ish. Then we get into the nervous system, which is your brain and spinal cord and nerves. This is the communication, where your body communicates with itself primarily, and also the site of higher cognitive functions, your executive decision-making, your ability to wake up when your alarm clock goes off at 7:15 to get you to an 8 o'clock class, all that good stuff. We'll talk about sense organs, your eyes, your nose, your ears, etc., which are a subset of the nervous system. We'll then talk about the endocrine system. So this is one of my favorites too. All of these different organs you see here, everything from the testes and ovaries to the pancreas, to the adrenal gland, thyroid, thymus, all of these organs that allow our body to maintain regulation of the internal environment. And this is, you'll get into this in more detail. If anyone's taking human phys this semester or has taken it, we'll get into more detail with how all of these things work, but we're going to primarily talk about the structure of those organs. Then, of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the cardiovascular system, heart, blood vessels, etc. Your lymphatic system, which is often overlooked, but super important for maintaining your fluid balance in your body, also important for immune function. We generally don't think about our lymphatic system until we have a problem with it and we get a swollen lymph node because we have an infection or something like that. But generally, the lymphatic system, I think, is a little bit, what do you call it? Like the stepchild of the organ systems. There's a specific word for this, like when there's a whole bunch of things and one of them's like often forgotten or kind of relegated to the side, right? There's a vocabulary word for this that I'm missing. It's like an SAT word. Come back to me on that one. Okay. Then a couple more. We've got our respiratory system, which is, of course, the airways and the lungs, which is essential for gas exchange. We've got the digestive system, which you're familiar with that. The urinary system. This is another one of my favorites. The kidneys are super cool in the way they work. And we'll spend some time looking at the kidneys and the associated structures, ureters, bladder, urethra, etc. And then finally, we have the reproductive systems. This course, we don't really spend a lot of time on the reproductive systems, to be honest. There's a lot more physiology there than I think anatomy, but we will touch on it a little bit. And you could argue, so the overall function of the reproductive system is the production of offspring, right? Your ability to produce kids. And we can make an argument that the ultimate goal, if we want to think of it that way, the ultimate endpoint of all of these organ systems we've talked about, integumentary, cardiovascular, lymphatic, et cetera, is actually this, to produce offspring. In an evolutionary sense, none of these things would be important if they didn't ultimately allow humans to produce more humans, and then so on and so on and so on. So we can make that argument that the end kind of goal, or I don't want to say goal, the end function of all these systems working together is to give you humans that ability. And I mean that in a broad sense. I'm saying you, meaning the whole human population of the world, not this class specifically. So that's what we're looking at this semester. It's cool stuff. I have never, my research, as I said, isn't in the area of human anatomy, but as I've taught this class more and more, I get more and more excited about it. So I'll bring in some other like recent current research and discoveries and things like that into class to share with you. And we can talk about that as it comes up. Human anatomy in the news. We're always learning new things about the human body, which is cool because it's pretty darn well studied for a long time. But there's still new stuff that researchers are discovering. Now pause there, take questions, and then just quickly summarize what we've gone over so far. One of my favorite things as an instructor is this moment when you ask for questions and it's just like silence and you can hear like the projector humming. It's like the tumbleweed blows by. So just to give you fair warning, I'd like to like relish in that and give it a long time. And sometimes it takes you like a couple seconds. You see instructors sometimes are like, any questions? Okay, great, let's move on. And you're like, oh, I didn't even get a chance to think about if I have a question. So I'll just pause in that awkward silence. We can all live in that for a minute and then we'll move on. Cool. All right. So far, we've talked about the approach that we take to anatomy in this class, which is systemic, meaning that we'll look at all of the skeletal system together, all of the cardiovascular system together, and so on. And we're mostly going to focus on gross anatomy, which is to say parts of the body you can see with the naked eye. But we will cover some histology, especially in the second lab, as you'll see. And then we'll touch on embryology, developmental anatomy, and functional anatomy a little bit. We're going to cover all of those systems that we just walked through. Now, how do I want to phrase this? Well, I don't like the way this is phrased, but the idea that I'm trying to say here is that we have the general overview. What this class does is get into the nitty-gritty details, which is a lot of memorization and of the parts and their names and how they're related to each other. And we'll get into that on Friday. Today, I just want to give a general overview of what we're going to be talking about. Questions? All right, let's transition a little bit then. And I want to just introduce myself as your instructor this semester. We'll be spending 6 hours a week together every week for the next 15 weeks. That's probably more time than I spend with anybody, including my own family. So you should know a little bit about each other. I grew up loving animals. I was always doing all kinds of stuff with animals. You can see me there back based on those shorts. It's probably about 1990 with a couple snakes that I had caught. I don't know why I have them around my neck. This teaching here at Ohio Wesleyan is kind of a switch of a career path for me. I was a high school teacher for many years in Denver, Colorado. And this is actually a photo that one of my students took. We did some work with snakes in the area of Denver. Anyone from Denver by any chance? I lived there for like 10 years. I really like Denver. It's a cool town. So I taught high school there for 6 years, and then I transitioned and I earned my PhD at Iowa State University, where I studied snakes. You can see me there, very happy with a couple of snakes we had caught. I studied snake physiology primarily and reproduction. And then I moved to France for 2 years, and I did completed research projects with lizards that lived in the mountains. You can see me there with a bunch of my research team at the top, research station at the top of one of the mountains in the Pyrenees. It was pretty great. If anyone wants to talk about France at any point, I'd be happy to. I actually spent the summer there this summer with a couple of Ohio Wesleyan students going back to the same spot and doing some research there. I actually have a photo of me and the 2 students from Ohio Wesleyan in this exact same spot from the summer. And then here at Ohio Wesleyan, I'm focused on research with the lizards, also salamanders. There's a couple recent OWU graduates you might know. Some of you might know Athena or Alyssa. They're part of our salamander research team. Let me give you that in a second. I also study urban lizards. So the same species that was in France happens to be here in Ohio. Here's our research team from last summer in Cincinnati. Some of you might know some familiar faces. Ethan and Sierra actually on the far right. They're both still students. CC, Princeton, and Sierra have all graduated. But yeah, we spent the better part of our summer back and forth in Cincinnati. We have lizards here in the lab. If you're interested in more, I put my lab website up here, or you can look at it. There's a link through the OWU website as well. But I'll talk more about this, but I'm looking for some students that might be interested in research with lizards or salamanders. So if any of you are interested in zoology stuff, an academic career in this area, something like that, come talk to me. I have some projects going on, and I am recruiting students, and also I'll be recruiting students to work for research credit. but also for pay. So if you're interested in that, I haven't done the formal announcement and stuff like that yet, but it's coming down the line. So talk to me about that. And that is me. I'm going to introduce Danny in a second, but first I'm going to pause and see what questions you have. Ask me anything. I might not answer, but go ahead, Gia. Ah oui, bien sûr. Toi aussi? No. Anyone speak French? No. Okay. Other questions? Zoe. Favorite? Oh, the common wall lizard, Podarcis moralis. It's like a love-hate relationship. It's like a what do they call it in like sports where like there's their rivalry and they kind of love each other, but they also hate each other. Do you have snake earrings? That's cool. I don't know. Yeah, because they drive me crazy. They're little jerks when you're in the lab trying to work with them, but you kind of gotta respect them. So, yeah, and they're the ones that are in Europe, but they're also here in Ohio having studies. Yeah. Questions? Yeah, Veronica. Oh gosh, it would great to go anywhere, everywhere. I'm hoping to go to Malaysia in a couple of years, and actually might go. I mentioned I'm not teaching this spring. I might spend some time in Australia.
Advice. I'm from Australia.
You're from Australia? Where are you from?
I grew up in
No kidding. Oh, that's all right. I'm gonna pick your brain then. A friend of mine's doing a research project there, and she invited me to come along and work with her sometime. So I have a bunch of colleagues and friends that are down there too. Yeah, I've never been. Is it cool?
There are lots of lizards.
There are lots of lizards and snakes. Yes, yes. Although you got to be a little careful with the snakes down there. That's for sure. Oh, that's cool. All right. Let me now transition and introduce Danny. Danny is our class tutor this semester, which is really exciting because I've never been able to start off this class with a tutor. So Danny, why don't you come on up and yeah. Actually, if you stand here where I'm standing, you'll get in the recording.
So like just right here or like
no, you come over, stand here, because then your face will be in the recording.
okay. So yeah, if you need anything from me, that's my email. I'm sure they're gonna have it up on the syllabus. So yeah. My major is pre-medicine, but I just changed to be a double major in pre-professional zoology. Yeah, so I'm going to be graduating in May of 2023 as well, and I play ultimate frisbee for the OWU team. I usually see me around at the gym, usually lift, and at home I'm usually cooking, having fun, doing whatever. But other than that, that's basically a basic synopsis of me. If you, anything else, need anything from me, just email me, and I'm sure I'll be able to respond very quickly. Yeah, other than that, really nothing else. If there's any question. I don't know. I just like to throw a bunch of crap together into a pan and see what happens. Usually that's I'm gonna stop there.
Right. And cool. And so Danny's taken a couple classes with me. He took 251 anatomy and physiology. He took human anatomy, did great in both classes, and we've been able to work through the resource center to hire him as a tutor for the class. I'll give you more information about that, but we'll have regular weekly sessions. He'll also be able to drop in on labs and things like that. So it's a great resource for us, and I'm pretty excited to be working with Danny this semester. Cool. All right. Let's talk about how the class is structured. So this is some information I've already shared, so I'll just put it up here quickly. And this is all in your syllabus, which I'll talk about in a second. That's me and the instructor, Dr. Eric Gangloff. You can generally hear at Ohio Wesleyan, the kind of culture is to call professors Dr. So-and-so, which is cool. Yeah, let's go with that. Professor's fine or whatever, that's cool. He, him pronouns are great. My office is in the Science Center in the other building of the Science Center in 331. My email's here and on the syllabus. The best way to contact me for sure is via email. I will respond within at least 24 hours during the week. Weekends and stuff like that, I tend to stay away from the email. But that's definitely the best way to contact me. And generally for this class, there's not going to be something urgent, like you're going to be like Saturday afternoon, like I need to talk to my professor about this. So yeah, let's go with that. And then every week, in addition to class, I have open student hours, basically times where I'm going to be in our lab room, which is room 301. And it's a couple hours where I'll just be there and you can come in and we can ask questions. and look at specimens and just review anything in class, anything like that. I tried to schedule this a time that was over one of the lunch breaks and hopeful that it would allow more of you to come. But it's just a drop in hours. You don't need an appointment. You don't need to be there for 2 hours. You can maybe have a quick question. It'll take 2 minutes. Just stop in. This is an open time while I'll be in the classroom ready to answer any questions. If you want to meet outside that time, just let me know. We can set up an appointment. Or if you're over in the Science Center and my office door is open, just stop in. I've got more details about this on the syllabus. We'll talk about it a little more. Textbook is required for the class and is really essential to success. It's a pretty good textbook. I've been very happy with this. This is the 3rd or 4th semester I've used this particular book. There will be assigned readings from it very often. And so you will reference it a lot. It's available at the OWU bookstore. Of course, there's a million places you can buy it online. There's a copy also available at the library, at the holds desks at Beagley. So you can find a copy there. I can even lend you a copy if you need it, or we can figure something out. If you go in online and get the 8th edition, so I have the 9th edition as required. If you get the 8th or even the 7th edition, that'll work just fine. Some of the page numbers for assignments might be a little different, but the content is the same and will save you a lot of money to get a slightly older edition. So you're welcome to do that. Ebook is fine. I don't care how you read it. So I'm trying to make it as flexible as possible. I've looked online and you can buy like a used copy of the 8th edition for not very much at all. So if that saves you some cash, then go for it. If you need help getting the textbook, let me know. Sound good? Cool. All right, let's talk about the class structure a little bit. I want to move through this. I'm talking a little bit too much today. So this is the class Blackboard site, which is now live. If you want to do some of this, if you have your laptop and want to do some of this along with me, you can. If not, no worries. It's not really going to be essential. But I want to just orient you that when you log into Blackboard, you go to this course and then you can find the syllabus, which is right here. And this is going to be this is a PDF document. I decided not to print it this semester just for the sake of not using a lot of paper, right? And so I'm just having an available PDF. If generally with our assignments, I'm going to keep them electronic with the exception of lab assignments, which I find students really like to have the paper copy in the lab. If that doesn't work for you, if you really want a paper copy, just let me know. I can print one. I'm just trying to minimize paper waste and usage. But you will need to read this syllabus before class on Friday, and I'll show you that assignment in just a second. I want to make sure you can orient yourself to it. Has anyone tried logging into the class Blackboard page yet? And it's open, it works, it looks like this. Good, it's good for you. Okay, cool. Cool. The syllabus there is in a PDF on Blackboard, as I mentioned. It has all of the course details. I am not going to read through this in detail with you right now because that's super boring. Instead, your assignment for Friday, one of your assignments is to read this carefully. It'll take you 15 minutes. And then on Friday, we're going to play a class game to test your knowledge of the information on the syllabus. I find that that's a much more engaging way to go through it, but I want you to know where it is. And it has all of the essential information about hours and how to contact us, us meaning myself and Danny, et cetera, et cetera. Cool. One thing I started last spring that I am going to continue to do is on your website, and there's also a link on your syllabus, there is a link to a Google form where you can provide anonymous feedback about anything in the class. It's just a way that if something happens and you want to share that information with me, you can let me know. It can be anything from something that happens with another student to I'm moving too fast through lecture, which is probably what will happen at some point in the semester. If you want to sign the comment and let me know who sent it, that's great. If you want to just leave anonymous feedback, that's fine too. It doesn't collect your email or anything like that. But I find it's useful just for students to have a way to communicate things that they might not want to sign their name to. So just know that that's there. At any point in the semester, you're welcome to use it and leave some feedback for me. Now, this class, those of you that have class with me before are familiar with this. I create class programs for each of our class sessions. I want to talk about the anatomy of a class program. And so if you go to Blackboard, you'll see a folder here called class programs. And in there, you'll find a class program for the 26th of August. If anyone, which is next class on Friday. Is anyone in there now? You can see this okay? Cool. So the class program is a PDF, and we'll have one of these for every single class. So there is a class program, 3 class programs a week. They're in PDF format, and what they contain is the following information. You'll first see the date that it's a program for, and note that the assignments on the class program are to be completed in advance of that coming class. So this is the class program for Friday. This is actually the class program for Friday, and you have a set of assignments that you should do before class on Friday. This will be reading. Sometimes I assign videos, things like that. For this Friday, your 3 assignments are 1, to read the course syllabus, 2, to complete an introduction survey, and we'll see if we have time to get that started today in class, and 3, to read some pages in your textbook, and 4, to sign up for Visible Body software, which is the software we'll use for our lab starting on Tuesday. There's details about that in your syllabus. So you have 4 things that you should do before class on Friday. For each of those things, I try to put an approximate work time so that when you look at this, you kind of know how much work you're going to have. So for example, I said reading the syllabus will take 20 minutes, completing this introduction survey will take 10 minutes, reading the textbook might take about 30 minutes, and then signing up for the software is going to take about 10 minutes. And just that way, it helps you plan, kind of know how long assignments will take. Of course, that'll vary. Some of you might read faster, some of you might read slower, etc. But I want to structure things so you can kind of plan like that. So every program is going to have some assignments like that. Sometimes they'll be pretty short. Sometimes it'll be just reading. But that way, we're very, very structured. You kind of know exactly what is the expectation to be prepared for the next class and what you should have ready. Sound good so far? Question, Abby.
Should we be like taking notes on the textbook, or is it just kind of like to get an idea of what we're going to be talking about?
Great question. Should we take notes on the textbook? That's really up to you and the way that is going to help you study the best. Sometimes students like to just read it and then come into lecture and kind of see what we cover. Sometimes you might want to read it, the textbook first, come to class, and then look back on the textbook to reference it. It's kind of an individual thing. The textbook will get a little more in-depth with some things that we will cover in lecture, but I try to be very intentional and not just say, okay, read the first half of the textbook. I try to give you like specific sections and pages that correspond exactly to what we cover in lecture. And you'll see that the lectures will fit it very nicely generally. I mean, I've used a lot of the diagrams in the books and everything like that. So I would say as a general answer, it wouldn't hurt to take notes. But as we work through the first couple of weeks of class, you can kind of feel out what's going to make the most sense for you. That's a good question. And Danny can maybe lend some insight into that too for what has worked for him.
Yeah. So usually what I do is just to, I mean, obviously I didn't pick everything up, but I got sort of like a general idea. So when I came into class, there's a good amount that I knew that I was hearing the second time.
Yeah, and that's key. The iteration is key because you look at the textbook, you hear it in class, and then maybe you go back and study it in another format or something. Cool. All right, so your class program also then contains assignments and then also upcoming announcements. And so, for example, in your class program for Friday, I have an announcement that your first quiz is coming up, and that is going to be a week from Friday. It's a little ways off. I will share the format and details of that with you, but I just want to give you the heads up. Next Friday in class, we will have a class and quiz that will cover material that we covered today, Friday, and that we basically cover through Wednesday of that week. So the first unit. So we have a quiz right away, and those announcements will be on the program. Then, and actually this might go back to your question a little bit, Abby. On each class program are the course learning outcomes associated with that day. These are essentially going to provide it's going to provide a study guide for you. So if you take the course outcomes from each of our class programs, from each of our classes, and put them together, that's going to be your study guide, because this tells you exactly the things you should know or understand based on the class. And so, for example, from today or going into Friday, you're going to understand the terms anatomy and physiology and the hierarchical organization of the body. So boom, that's something you need to know. That will be on a quiz or a test or something like that. And you can go back, look at your lecture notes, look at the textbook, and make sure you understand that concept. And then finally, each program will have some kind of stupid cartoon on it, usually containing some kind of anatomy joke, but not always because there's a limited number of anatomy jokes in the world. One other thing, and this is mentioned in the syllabus, but I'll just mention it now. I am recording all of the classes. And if you go back to our, if you go back to Blackboard, you'll see this lecture recordings here. The course has a YouTube channel. I'm going to post all of the lectures up there for you. I find that this was a great resource, especially during the era of COVID, but students like this generally. The lecture quality, the video is not great. I don't have like a nice camera setup. I'm not setting it up to get like a super nice recording that I want to share with the world. What I found is it's a really nice reference for students. If there's a particular concept that they didn't get, they can go back and just skip to that part of the lecture and rewatch it. Also, if you're not feeling well, you got the snivels, you're not sure if you should come to class or not, then it takes the pressure off a little bit and makes it easier to catch up on work. So you have that option as well. I definitely do not recommend just blowing off class so you can watch the lecture later. And it's kind of boring. You don't want to sit in front of your computer and watch me on YouTube for 40 minutes. That sounds terrible. It's much more exciting in class. And we do a lot of activities and stuff like that in class as well. But I'm hoping that it provides a useful resource for everyone. It makes things a little bit easier. And sometimes you miss class because you've got supporting. I mean, we have what, 45 classes throughout the semester. You're going to miss a couple here and there. And that's just the way it works. So that'll make it a little easier. That's the plan. That's everything I have for right now. We only have a few minutes. I thought we'd have a little more time at the end here. Before I get to my last wrap-up slide, what questions do you have, especially thinking about what you should do for class on Friday? Morgan, please.
Quizzes, are they on a Friday, or is it just at any point?
Good question. Our quizzes on a Friday, it changes, it varies. You'll see in your syllabus that I have quizzes and tests like by the week, but I don't say what day of the week it is because it just depends on what the week's schedule is. So the first one happens to be on a Friday, but they won't always be on a Friday. And I find that some students really like having them on a Friday because then they can be done and not think about studying for the weekend. I find other students really like having it on a Monday, so they have the weekend to study. So I just kind of mix it up usually. Good question. Thanks, Morgan. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Is our second lab practical and
Your second lab practical, yes, on the syllabus, and I'll talk about this on Friday, happens at the allotted time of our final exam in December. It's on a Tuesday morning after classes end. And I can talk about why later, but I really like doing the lab practical during that final exam time. It gives us a little more space and flexibility for the lab practical. And you'll have 2 lab practicals throughout the semester. Yeah, good question. We'll talk about that. That's all in the syllabus. So all of the details about syllabus we'll cover on Friday when we do, we're going to do a Kahoot on Friday and see what you know about the syllabus. And if you win the Kahoot, then everyone in the class will have a huge amount of respect for you. And that's what we want at the end of the day, right? Gia. I knew someone was going to ask that question. I generally, okay, so I don't share lecture slides. And the reason for that is I don't feel like they do a great job of relaying the information on their own. What I do is record all of the lectures and post them. So if there's a particular slide where you want that figure for your notes or something, it's very easy to go and pause the recording on that slide, get that image, and you can put it in your notes that way. Students often want the slides ahead, and I've been resistant to do that for a couple different reasons. But I find so far anyway that the recordings have provided a nice way for me to present the information in a way that I want to present it, but also provide that resource. So, and I'm happy to revisit that if you have really strong feelings or it would be really helpful. We can talk about that in some capacity, but at least to start, that's what I like to do. Good. Thanks for asking that. Always comes up. I was waiting for that question. Any others? Danny, go ahead.
Wanted to say something about the survey. I actually have like something like kind of like a little part of the survey that I offered. There's a lot of options I offer in terms of things. Like I have flashcards, which are pretty in depth and pretty in detail. So like by chance you need a review or a test or anything like that, I have options like that or some lecture based sort of work or anything. So I think like if you ever have a chance, I'm just, I think be useful to like offer
Mhm. Yeah, so here, actually, while I was talking about that, so I will end most classes with what I call a ticket out. It's usually use a QR code to go to a Google form and generally answer a couple questions about class. Today's is actually a little longer. It's an introduction survey. I have, excuse me, I have the link to this in your class program for Friday as well. So if you want to take some time and do this now, I think it'll take you about 10 minutes. Go for it. If you want to just gloss over it now and do it before Friday, that's fine too. It has questions just to help me orient myself to everyone in the class and get to know you a little bit. And then also has some logistical questions like when would you like to have tutoring sessions and things like that. So again, this is available now in QR code, or you can just do it before class on Friday. And note that it is worth, where is that, 2 class points as well. So that's going to be your first point assignment in class. And so with that in mind, I was hoping I'd give you a little more time. We've only got a couple minutes left, but I'll stop here. If you want to take some time, if you have a one-on-one question, want to chat now, that's a great time to do it. Otherwise, as I said, you can do the survey now or just do it before class on Friday. There's a link in your class program for this. And just let me know if you have any questions between now and Friday. Otherwise, we'll see you Friday morning and we'll start diving into some cool anatomy.